I'm quite often asked by new clients and by friends and people that I meet to describe my work. And I struggle when I have to describe it. And it became quite obvious to me that when I'm describing what I do as a designer, my style of design, that I'm always talking about one thing and I'm contradicting myself immediately. So I talk about, well, my gardens are formal. Actually, they're not formal. My gardens have structure, but they don't have structure. My gardens are very crisp. Actually, they're not very crisp. And so it's become very obvious to me that something that I do just out of the love of how I put things together, when I'm designing, it's not that I look at something and say, well, I need to have this here because of such and such. I do it because the feel is right, and it comes from a feeling rather than driven by design. So all my design work is generated from how I interpret the landscape, the architecture, and how I try to create the right balance of formality and informality. And I always say that formality and informality, or a garden, it has to be like a set of scales. And they have to balance. There's a little bit of flexibility allowed within that balance, but if it becomes too formal, it tips too far that way and it makes the garden unapproachable. And if it becomes too relaxed and there's not enough formality to help with the informality, then the garden goes too far the other way. So it's a very fine balancing act. So I want to talk about various gardens, but equally when I'm designing gardens, and it very rarely happens, but as a designer sometimes a garden is not appropriate. And that's really important to remember, and it's that restraint that is so important. Quite often with a beautiful building sitting in a beautiful landscape, you ruin the beauty of that combination by putting a garden in. So we have to weigh up exactly very carefully whether or not we want to actually put a formal or informal garden in front of a building or around a building. This is a wonderful house in Staffordshire, and it's called Tixall. It's all that remains from a very large grand house that was demolished in 1926. And this was the gatehouse to that house. But I've just put this up as an example because the architecture is so beautiful and it's so formal that it's balanced perfectly by just sitting in this parkland. And that's sort of what I try to do with my gardens. It's giving them balance. And formality or informality can help us to feel comfortable within our gardens. Now, our gardens and the gardens I create them to be gardened. I create gardens for clients that love gardening. And so everything I put into the garden is about gardening. And so most of what I do is about soft landscaping. I try not to use too much hard landscaping. Of course, you need hard landscaping to hold a garden together, but it's about using plants as my ingredients.